Hi and welcome to this special pivot table webinar. My name is John Michaelides and I'm the founder of MyExcelOnline.com, and I'm also going to be your tutor for today's webinar. Now, this is my house and my studio, and this is where I do all of my Excel recordings and also my webinars. So welcome to my house, and I'm going to tell you that I've spent many hours perfecting this webinar just to make sure that you're going to get great value and lots of pivot table tips so you can walk away from this and become more efficient just after 45 minutes. And I want to make sure that I deliver. Okay, so once again, I'd like to thank you for taking your precious time out to come into this webinar, and that means that you're a really special person and you're different from the rest because you're committed to your success, and I'm going to try my best to help you out. So let's get started. Let's go straight into the slides and into the Excel pivot table course. Okay. Okay, we're here in the Excel workbook, and what we're going to talk about today are several different parts that we can use a pivot table for. Now, on the left hand side here, we have our different subtopics. Now, we're going to firstly create a pivot table, then we're going to format it, then we're going to use the values by calculation, then we're going to use the values as calculation, then we're going to group, then we're going to insert some slices and charts. Then from that, we're going to create a cool interactive dashboard. And finally, I want to end with just a few time-saving and cool tips. Okay, so let's get started with creating a pivot table. So let's go in here in our data source. So normally what we get from our ERP systems at work, when we get different downloads, we get lots of transactional data, as you can see here. Okay, it goes all the way down. It could be many rows of data. With a pivot table, you got up to 1 million rows of data that you can use. Okay, now normally we have it in this format here, which is called a tabular format. So our data has to have a unique column heading, like we have products there, and then at the bottom have our different products. The same thing for salesperson. That's the unique column heading, and then have the different salespeople all the way down here. Okay, so this is a tabular format. Now, one thing you got to make sure is when you have a date, for example here, make sure that that's formatted in a date format. Okay, so to do that, you can just click on there, and from in here, just go to short date. Now, when you have values like we have here, also make sure that we have values in there and there are no text cells. Okay, so just make sure that each column pertains to the information that it has to have. Okay, so an important thing is we have a blank column down here. Okay, now to do a pivot table, it's not going to work. We're going to make sure that there are no blank columns or rows. So if you have something like this, just highlight it, right click and delete it. The same thing here, you can see we have a blank row. Right click and delete. Okay, so just make sure that before you start that your data is set up properly like we have here. Now, another thing is you should always use Excel tables. Now, Excel tables are fabulous. I use them all the time. It doesn't matter if you have 1 million rows of data or you just have 3 lines of data. Always use Excel tables because they're going to help you when you refresh and update your pivot tables with more data. And also it has some other cool functions, and that's just another topic, but I'll show you just what I mean. Okay, so to create a Excel table, you just click in there and you can press insert and table. Okay, another thing is a shortcut, Control T. Control T. And what it does, it knows that your data is all the way down there. And also it's always good just to make sure, okay? For example, here we have a total there. We don't want that total there, okay? So just make sure that we go all the way to 577 and then press OK. All right, I'm just gonna clear that. So this is the table. And let me just move that here. We know there's a table is because when we get out of it, we don't get this pop-up tool tab up here. When we click in it, we have these table tools. As you can see there, we've got different designs, okay? So it's another cool thing. We've got different designs there. Another thing is when you scroll down, just have a look now. When I scroll down, the column headings stay there. That doesn't happen with a non-Excel table. So that's another cool feature. The best feature for me is, let me press Control down, or the Control and the down arrow key, all the way down here. What we can do now is when we're in the table, we get these table tools, as I said before. If we're out of it, we can't do anything. So we're gonna go back into it. Okay, now the total row, this is the best function. What it does is, it gives you a total. You probably can't see it here. Let me make it a bit bigger. Okay. All right, so it gives you formulas in there. So you can actually sum the whole row, okay? It just automatically sums it, or you can count it. It gives you how many transactional rows of data we have there, and also we can do an average, okay? So that's the best bit about it, okay? Now to add a row, you just right click in there and go to insert, okay? Or you can go all the way to the end here and just press the tab key. Or you can also, if you can see here on the corner, see how it's changed there? You can also drag it down, so you can add information there, okay? So, always use Excel tables, okay? So let me just make this a little bit smaller. So now we have our Excel table. Let's insert a pivot table. Let's go to Insert and Pivot Table. Okay, so we have this dialog box. It says, what is your range? Now, because it's a table, it knows it as a name. So it gives us table 1. Let me escape out of that. Another thing is when we go to Table Tools, Design, the table name is here. You can change that. You can say table 2. It doesn't really matter. Let's go again to Insert and Pivot Table. You see there, table 2. So it sees that as just one structured reference. We have the table, that's okay. The next question it asks us is choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed. We can put it into an existing worksheet, which is somewhere in here, or we can go to a new worksheet. What it does is it creates a brand new worksheet. If I said existing worksheet, we can put it in here, or we can go into any other worksheet, okay? Now what we want is a new worksheet and press OK. So what it does is it puts it into a new worksheet in here. So from in here you can create your pivot table. But what I'm going to do is just go back in here, go again, doesn't really matter, insert pivot table, and I'm going to go another example just to show you and go to an existing worksheet and go in here, and we can just put it all the way there and press OK. All right, so it's put in the pivot table into this originally created worksheet. So if I step out of there, you can see that the field list goes away. To bring it back, you just got to step into it, okay? Now I can close it from there, and from in here under options, I can reactivate it. I can also grab it and move it all the way across. You know, we can put it over here. To lock it back in, go all the way to the right as if you're throwing it out of the screen, and it locks back in there. So in here we have our column headings, okay? So you see them all there. Now, in the row labels are here, okay? Going down on the left side, you can see here, that's a row labels there. So in here, it shows us the unique values from the field down the rows of the left side of the pivot table. And normally here, we're gonna put in there products, names, location, and business units. In here, we're gonna put our products. You can just drag and drop just like this. That's the best way. That's the way I do it. And as I've done that and dropped it in here, you can still get a live preview, and it gives us the unique values that pertain to the products column. Now I'm going to grab the salesperson and drop it in there. So you can see we have the products and the salesperson. I can also move it to the top and have the salesperson on top and the products in there. Okay, that's the row labels. Now the column labels up here, it's what goes across here, okay, on the top. And usually we have the trending there. So we have months, periods, and years, okay? So in here, we're going to grab the year and just drag and drop into the columns, okay, as you can see there. Let me just move it all the way here. Okay, so you can see it much better, okay? So we get a live preview of the unique items that are within the year. So we had 2012, 2013, and 2014. Okay, now the values which is in here, which is in the guts of the pivot table, here we put in our sales normally. Okay, so let's get our sales in here and drop it in there. So as you can see, it's put it all in order for us in years and in salesperson and products. In the report filter, we put items that we want to drill down on, for example, regions, employee names, lines of business. So in here, let's just put in, for example, let's put channel partners, okay? And you can see the filter comes up there, okay? So we can drill down from there. So as you can see, we've done a quick pivot table in a matter of minutes. It's as easy as that. Now, if you have any questions, just type it in now, and then I'll get back to you at the end of the course. Now, once again, this has been recorded, and you're gonna receive this video, and then you can have a look at it at your leisure. So, very easy. I just did it in a couple of minutes. I was explaining it, but it doesn't really matter. If you don't want to have salesperson now, you're going to have a year in the row labels, you just take it, drop it, and drag it across, just like that. It doesn't really matter, okay? Or you can put it in there. You can chop and change. It just depends on what you want to show or what your boss is looking for. At the end of the day, we always get the instructions from our bosses because they get instructions from their bosses, and we always create those reports based on their needs. And it changes from day to day or from week to week. If you do a cool report, I'm sure that your boss is going to come back to you the next day and say, oh, can you do me another report of this and that? So once you get the appetite wet, they're going to come back to you all the time, and they're going to love you for it. Trust me. Okay, so now let's go to the format. One second, let me have a sip of water. All right, now in formatting, okay. So what I do here, let me just go back to the original way it was. Okay, no, it was years. Okay, just like that. I can probably take out salesperson there just to make it a little bit smaller. Okay, now what we can do, we can actually copy this, just highlight everything. And you press Control Copy. Or from the options, you can go to select entire pivot table, Control Copy, and let's go in here. Let's go to Format, okay, and Control V, so it puts it in there, okay. Now, what we can do in formatting, refreshing a pivot table. So once your data source changes, for example, this is our data source, Control down to go all the way down. Let's just drag in here. Okay, so for example, your information gets updated by another person, or the next day it just gets updated. Let's update this. Let's click on there and press Control D, shortcut to copy down. So whatever's above. Okay, so we've copied this. Now, for example, let's put in a high value here. Let's put in 1 million. Let's put 10 million. Okay, so let's go back to our pivot table in here. It hasn't got updated. Now, to update a pivot table, you need to refresh. So to refresh, click on your pivot table, go to Options, Refresh. Or what I like to do, right click and refresh. Here we go, in there. Okay. So we have the change that was made there. Okay, so what we can, you always got to make sure just to refresh. So if we go back in here, data source, right click, delete, go back to our pivot table, you're going to see this is going to get changed. Go to Options and refresh. You see that? So always make sure to refresh when your pivot table gets updated. Now, another thing we can do is number formatting. To format these numbers, let's bring up our field list again and go to values. One way is to go in here and go to value field settings. And from in here, choose number format. And from in there, we can number and then put some separator and then put in like that and press OK. So we have the formatting done like that. It looks much better. Now let me press Control Z just to go back. Okay. Another way is to just right click in there, go to number format, and then from in there is a quick way. Always right click. There's a lot of options there. Pivot table designs. Okay. If we're out of here, you can't do anything with pivot table. You always got to make sure to step into the pivot table. So it gives us the pivot table tools tab here. Now under the design option, we have over 80 different styles in here, light, medium to dark. It just depends on what you like. You can just scroll across and you see that you get a live preview, which is awesome. Okay. I like using this here. Now, another thing is under design, you can go under subtotals and you can switch on and off the subtotals. Grand totals, you can switch on and off the grand totals. Let's press off. You can see that. Okay. And let's put it back in. Okay, let's right click in here and bring the field list up again. So we have the sum of sales in here. Now we can drop this as many times as we want. So let's go again, drag and drop in here, as you can see. And let's do it one more time. Okay. And now that we're in here, we can just, from the drop down box, just click in there and go to value field settings. And in here, we have the sum, which is what we have, but we can change it to count, average, maximum, minimum, the product, the count numbers. It's got 11 different options there. Now let's choose count and press OK. And then for in here, let's do the same thing and let's choose the average. So as you can see here, if we just scroll across, we have the sales, we have the count, which is the number of transactions, and we also have the average for the regions and the products. Now from in here, we can choose to select just 1 year, 2012, so we can see that. And just to make this a little bit better, we can get rid of the grand totals, so off for rows and columns. And then once again, right click in here, number format, and just make this a little bit prettier. And press OK. And then we can just highlight that and put it in the middle. Okay, so we have the sum of sales, we have the count of sales and the average of sales. Now we can change this as well here. Instead of saying count of sales USD2, we can just put in the count just like that. Okay, delete that. And here we can do the same thing for average. Now if it doesn't let you, because say for example there's a field name called average, just make sure you put a space in here, okay, and then press OK, and that will fix that problem. Now, if we right click and show field list, you can see that that has been changed there automatically as well. So pretty neat stuff. Instead of sales, we can have different metrics to show on our pivot table. So you can move this around if you want, the count to the average and so forth. Okay. So let's go to the show values as. All right. Now, what we're going to do is let's put in another pivot table, insert pivot table, existing worksheet. Let's go to our location and put in that and press OK. Okay, so we've created another pivot table. So in here, let's drop in our sales month in the row labels and the financial year in the column labels. We'll make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so the other thing that we're going to do now is put in our sales in there. Okay, so let's just make a few cosmetic changes, which I like, and then we can get going. Okay, here we are. Let's get rid of the grand total. We can just click in there, right click, remove grand total. All right, so let's bring our field list in here and just move this a bit in here. So, okay, instead of doing that, we can just keep it there. That's fine. Make this a little bit smaller. Okay, so you can all see that. All right. So let's go back into our pivot table to activate our field list. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put in there another metric, which is called dollar of running total in, or year to date. To do this, you've got to grab your sales and drop it into your values area. Okay, from in here, click value field settings. Now, instead of summarize values by, which is what I showed you guys before, let's go to show values as. And from in here, you have an array of different calculations. Okay, so I'm going to go through every one of them now. I'll just show you a couple of different ones. Okay, now let's go to the running total in. Okay, running total in. So running total in means year to date. Okay, so to give us the total per month, and it will accumulate the previous month and then add it on, and it will give us a year to date. Okay, in just simple terms. Now the base field, we want to make the base field being the month, because that's what we're going to increment. Okay, so we're going to show values as the running total in on a monthly basis. Okay, that's how you read this. Press OK. All right, so let's get out of this here. Now, what I'm going to do is just show 2012. Okay, so right click, number format. All right, here we are. So what it does is it adds 771,000 January, and then it adds 867 in here. Okay, so those two there, the sum is 1638. Now, if you can't see this here, right click and make sure that your sum is activated. This is a cool tip to use all the time. You can have the average, count, sum, maximum, minimum. So whenever you choose a selection of sales, it gives you just some quick metrics. Okay, so it shows us here it's 1638, which is in there. Okay, Jan to March, 2.4 million, which is in there. You can see it increments all the way to the total. Okay, let's activate our field list again. What I'm going to do now is just drop in the year. Okay, I'm going to drop in the year. First of all, let's clear the filter for the year. So we're going to show everything. Grab the year and drop it into the row labels. Okay, so we just have the years and the months going in there. Okay, so now you can see we've done that. It does the same thing for each year. It starts in the new year and it adds the year to date, okay, for that particular year, which is, you can move around and it still has that metric there. Now, I want to add in another one, which is the difference from the previous month. Okay, so once again, grab the sales and drop it in here. So once we drop it into the values area, we can do as many metrics as we like. Okay, drop down arrow, value field settings, show values as. Now we're going to show the difference from the previous month. Now, drop down box there and go down to difference from. Okay, now the base item previous and the base field month. Just make sure these are correct. Okay, so what it says here is it's going to show us the values as the difference from the previous month. That's how you read it. Difference from previous month, and press OK. All right, so let me just format this a little bit better. Get rid of that. Okay, number format, and I like to put in a minus red for the negatives. Okay, it just stands out. So what it gives us is just a difference between the previous month. So the difference between Jan and Feb, you can see there was an increase of 95,000, and then there was a decrease of 83,000 from Feb to March, and then March to April there was an increase of 124, and so on and so on. Okay, so you can see the difference from the previous month. So you got all these different metrics, and you got heaps more. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, in my Extreme Pivot Table course, I go through every single item. So every single item that you see in here, okay, all this, I'll go through every single one, okay? All right, so I hope you understand that. And once again, if you have any questions, just type them in there now. Let me just have a bit of a sip of the water, and we can continue on. Okay, so you can see the power within a pivot table, and you don't have to use formulas. You just got to choose the right buttons, and then you have it there. And if your information gets updated in your data source with another 100,000 rows, all you got to do is go back in here, right click, refresh, and it gets updated. Imagine that, the power of that. You can show that to your boss, take a screenshot and say, hey, this is how business is going. This is how our products are trending, and you can make some insightful business decisions. And I'm telling you, you're going to be the go-to person in your job once you master pivot tables. Well, you don't really have to master them. You just learned it now. So if you can just show this, you become a master in your work. Imagine if you learn every single different item that you can do with a pivot table, then you'll be doing courses like myself. All right, let's move on. Grouping. Okay, so now we can group our pivot table, and I'll show you 3 different ways how we can do that. One of them is grouping numbers, the other one is grouping the date, and also we can also group by text. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just drop in another pivot table. Click in there, insert pivot table. Let's go to our grouping area here. Let's go into the numbers. All right, and do it in there. So what we're going to drop in here are the sales in the row labels. Okay, something that's not usually done. So let's drop it in there, and it shows us all the unique sales amounts. Okay, you got heaps there. Okay, and we can just click in there, right click, and choose group. Okay, and it automatically chooses where to start and where to end by the minimum maximum amount. And these are the increments, 10,000, and we can put in 100,000, or we can put in 20,000, whatever we want. Let's just use 10,000 and press OK. And look at that, it gives us the sales ranges. Okay, so now what we can do is grab the sales and drop it in here. Okay, now it gives us the count of sales, so it just counts how many transactions are between 0 and 9,999, and then so on. Okay, now let's drop in the sales in here again, and instead of having a count, let's choose the sum. Okay, so we have the sum in there. So we have the sum and the count. So for example, for the sales range 90,000 and 99,000, so between 90,000 and say 100,000, so the individual sales value between that range, we had sales of $5.8 million. That's what it's saying there. And we had 62 transactions between that sales range. Okay, if you want to ungroup it, right click and just press ungroup. Okay. Now date fields. What I'm going to do is go in here and just create a quick pivot table again. It takes us a few seconds. Okay, and drop it in here. Now what I'm going to do in here is drop in the order date in the row labels. Order date, row labels. So it gives us the unique order dates. Okay. All right. So from in here, we just right click and group. Okay, because it's dates, Excel is smart enough and it gives us the grouping by the dates. Okay, so we can group by days. If it's in blue, it means it's selected, and click again to unselect. Okay, so we can select in quarters. Okay, because the starting and ending date is automatic. Just leave it like that, quarters, and press OK. And you can see it's done in quarters. Let's press Ctrl Z to go back, and then right click and group. Let's do by days. Okay, when we choose days, it gives us a number of days option, scroll bar. So let's choose 7. Okay, so 1 week. Let's group by weeks and press OK. So you can group by weeks. So now we've got that, we can put in our sales and say, okay, how much sales did we make for that week? Go like that. Now we're getting a count of sales. The reason why we're getting a count of sales, a couple of reasons. One is that you may have in your sales column a blank cell. If you have at least one blank cell, you're gonna get a count of sales. Another way is that, let's go back in here, is because once we group values and then you create another pivot table like we have now, it gives you a count. Okay, so don't freak out if you get a count. All you got to do is just click in here, okay, and then just put in and double click sum. Okay, so we have the different sales values or the total sales per week. So you can see there, okay, the different sales per week. All right, now finally we can put in there another pivot table. Okay, you see that? It's just in there. All right, now let's move this across in here so you guys can see a little bit better. Now we're going to put in the regions in the row labels and the years in the column labels. Okay, so, and also let's not forget sales in the values area. Okay, we get a count because we have a grouped sales before. Okay, let's put in that. Okay, perfect. Okay, so what we can do now is we can actually group text. For example, let's just say that our organization changed and Americas and Europe is one region or one pole or whatever you want to call it, and Asia and Africa is just a different region or pole. What we can do is name this West. So highlight that, right click and group. So it automatically gives us a group name, group 1, and then it puts those into separate groups as well. So let's just don't worry about this now. It gives us group 1. Let's change that. Let's change that to West. Let's just type in there West. Okay, and in here let's just highlight all that, right click and group and name that East. So we have our two groups, East and West. Okay, and you can see here region 2 has been created here, okay, because we've grouped text. What we can do now is we can actually grab this and move it across, okay, just like that, and we can have East and West, and we can see the different values that pertain to the West. You can see it's only America and Europe, and East only Asia and Africa. Okay, or we can just move it back like that. So you can group text as well. So now we're going to go on to the fun part, which I love, slices and charts. Okay, so now we're going to grab our text in here. Okay, so let's just group text, control copy, go in here and just put it in there. Okay, all right, so we have that in there. Let's just get rid of the grand total. Okay, make this like that. Perfect. Okay, so now to insert a slicer, first of all, slices, what they are large buttons that show you what has been selected in your filters. So they are your visual filters. Now if you click in there, you have these different options there, and say you just select a couple, 2013, 2014. Okay, it doesn't show you in here what's selected apart from in here what's not selected. Okay, but with a slicer you can actually see the selections made and you can see what has been selected. Okay, so let's just clear that. Now to insert a slicer, click in your pivot table, go to options and insert slicer. Okay, here we are. So it gives you the list of your fields, okay, or your column headings. You can choose any one of them. It doesn't have to be in your pivot table. Okay, it can be outside of your pivot table. So in here, what I'm going to do now is put in the salesperson slicer. Okay, so something that's not in there. Just put in the salesperson and press OK. All right, so here we have one of our slices. Okay, and you can actually from in here just change the style. Okay, if you click out of it and click into it, you can see the slicer tools option. Okay, so you can actually choose different colors in there. All right, okay, so if we choose Homer, Ian Wright, John McLuders, and Michael Jackson, you can see that information gets updated accordingly. Okay, so we have one slicer. Go and drop in another pivot table. Let's go back to create one in our data source, insert pivot table, and let's go to our existing worksheet in here. Okay, and press OK. All right, so let's create that. Let's move in here and let's put in our cells in here. Okay, so because it was grouped, as you can see, it's already grouped for us. Okay, so let's grab the sales and then drop it in here and just get that one there. All right, perfect. So we have our second pivot table. So what we can do now is drop in a slicer from in here. So we're in the pivot table, options, insert slicer. Let's go into the months. Okay, so we have the different months you can see there. Okay, and that changes there. All right, so we choose the month and we can also grab it and scroll down. Okay, we can also press Control key and select and unselect a couple, or use a Shift key as well to select multiple items. Okay, so we have our slicer. So we have two slices. Okay, one for our first pivot table we'll put up there, and we have this other one for this second pivot table. Now, just another thing you can do here, once you click in the slicer, under slicer tools, columns, you can actually put into 3 different columns. Okay, just a cool trick. So you can have it into quarters there. Okay, and let's change it around a bit. Okay, make it a bit more fun. Okay, now one thing that we can do now is let's put in a pivot chart. Okay, so we have a slicer. We have this slicer that's connected to there. Let's just get rid of this. It's annoying. Okay, we have the month that's collected in here. That's connected, sorry, in there. Now, okay, so now we can insert a pivot chart. Let's go to options. So once you're in the pivot table, go to options and pivot chart. Okay, so in here, let's choose a column. Okay, and press that. So it gives us our pivot chart. Now, right click in the button there and just hide or fill buttons on chart. Just get rid of that because that's annoying. All right, so let's just put that in here. well, we just for now, okay, just to make it visible to all of you, we'll just put it in here just for now. Okay, so as that changes, the pivot table changes, which is connected to the pivot chart, and that changes as well. Okay, and then top right hand corner, just to clear it so we can have all the selections there. Okay, so there's a pivot chart connected to the pivot table, which is connected to the slicer. It's like a big happy family. Okay, now let's put in another pivot chart for this pivot table here that we created. So options, pivot chart, and let's choose a bar chart and press OK. All right, and once again, let's just get rid of the buttons there. Okay, and you can just name this whatever you like, but let's just get rid of it for now. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is just place it on, just leave it here for now. Okay, so with our second slicer, which is connected to the second pivot table, okay, up here, let's just make it like that. Okay, better still, let's just move it in here. All right, so we have our second slicer, in here. Okay, just to separate a bit because it may get confusing. All right, so this side here is a different pivot table, different slicer, and different pivot chart. Okay, so if we change that, you can see that the amounts change in pivot table and also your pivot chart. Okay, so it's pretty cool. All right, but we can take this a step further. We can connect this slicer with this other slicer in here. Okay, so we can connect these two slices and then control the pivot tables and the pivot charts. Okay, and I'll show you how to do this. All right, let's just put that in there. Now go on to this slicer, right click and choose pivot table connections. In here, okay, we're going to choose, there's a lot of different pivot tables, but what we want to connect is, we want to connect this slicer, okay, to this slicer in here. So to do this, just click in the second pivot table that we're connecting, because we want to get the name. So options, pivot table 11, okay, that's pivot table 11, and this is pivot table 9. So pivot table 9 and 11 have to be married. So once again, right click in your slicer. Okay, pivot table 9 is chosen. Let's choose pivot table 11. Let's connect these two pivot tables. So by connecting these two pivot tables, we're connecting the slicers and the pivot charts. Okay, the same thing in here for the second pivot table that we created. Right click, pivot table connections, and let's connect it to pivot table number 9, which is on the left hand side. Okay, see what happens now. As I change one slicer, both charts change and both pivot tables change. See that? As I change the other slicer, both pivot charts change. So now from this, we can create a cool dashboard. To do that, select the slices, hold down the control key, select the pivot charts, Control X, let's go to our dashboard area, okay, and press Control V and escape, okay. So now we have our cool little dashboard in here with our two different, let's just put in there, pivot charts. So as we change one, we can see they both change as well, okay? So it's pretty cool, isn't it? So we can add another slicer from in there. We can also go to Analyze. Okay, so in the pivot chart, we can go to Analyze, Insert Slicer. Let's insert the year. Okay, so let's put in the year in here. Okay, let's make this another color. So from a pivot chart, you can actually put in a slicer. We could have done it the other way. We could have gone into our pivot tables, but I just showed you another way. All right, so let's right click this new slicer and let's connect it to pivot table number 9. Okay, just make sure it's always connected. So 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. Look at that, and the title changes. Now we've created a quick dashboard, and I am sure that your boss is gonna fall off his or her chair and fall in love with you and give you a pay rise. If they don't, come to me and I'll speak to them. All right, so this is how easy it is to create a slicer, a pivot chart, and connect them together and do a cool dashboard. As your data gets updated, all you got to do is just right click in your pivot tables, refresh, and the information in here gets updated as well. Okay, let's finish off with some cool tips. Okay, now what I'm going to do is grab, okay, just control copy there, just grab this and put it in here. Okay, maybe not, let's just go and grab maybe this one here. Okay, it's a little bit smaller, control copy in there. All right, let's do that just to show you. Okay, just a few tips in here. Okay, sometimes you get empty cells. Now in here we don't have any empty cells, but say you do get empty cells. Now if you want to show a value for a empty cell, you got to click in your pivot table, go to options and options, and in here layout and format, you can see for empty cells show. You can put in there a 0. Okay, so instead of being empty, you put in there a 0. Okay, now another thing is that say you make this a little bit bigger. Okay, make it pretty, and then you right click and you refresh. It moves it back in. It's annoying, isn't it? Well, I hate that. So again, options and auto fit column width on update. We don't want that. We don't want it to auto fit. We want to keep it the way it is. So say you want to make it bigger and pretty and just keep it like that, and right click and say you refresh your data, it keeps it like that. So that's a cool tip. Another thing is, okay, say that someone else has been updating your data source. Okay, you go all the way down here and they just keep on updating it, and then you open this workbook and then you don't know that someone else has gone in there and updated the information, and that new information is not being reflected, okay, because it hasn't been refreshed because you didn't put it in there, someone else did. How are you going to know? So a good tip to know is you can actually, every time you open your workbook, the pivot tables can refresh automatically. Okay, so you don't have to go in there and refresh all the time. So I'll show you how to do this. Again, options and options, options and options, and data. And the third option here is refresh data when opening the file. Click that. So the next time you open your file, okay, you get a little message here, that's fine. The next time you open your file, your pivot table will be refreshed. That's one less thing that you need to do. Okay, in here, what's due next month? Okay, so what we're going to do now is let's put in there another pivot table. Let's go into our grouping, our date filter here. Let's go to select entire pivot table. Okay, and let's just put it in here. Let's make it a little bit bigger, maybe not that big. Okay. All right, here we are. So we have our dates in here, and let's just right click and we can ungroup for now. Okay. Now, I want to see what's due next month. So from the drop down box, you get the date filters. You can actually see here next month, this month, last month. It lists next quarter or next year. So let's go to next month. Okay, so it gives you here the dates that pertain to next month. And say, for example, these were invoices, accounts payable that you had to pay. You'll actually know what amount you need to pay next month. Okay, now when you come in next month and you open this table, it automatically refreshes for the following month. So you don't need to change anything. And you have an array of different options there. Okay, so you can go through that as well. Now, another tip here, okay, is top 10 orders. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this just quickly. Let's just put in there. Okay, so now click in there, right click, show field list. So instead of order date, let's put in there our, okay, let's put in our channel partners. Okay, and we have our sales there. So channel partners and sales. Let's go, instead of top 10 orders, we can say our top 10 salespeople. Okay, or sorry, channel partners. From in here, we can go to value filters, and because it knows that we have values in there, okay, not dates, it will give us the value filters, top 10. Okay, so top 10 in here, we can do top or bottom. We can do 5, 10 or 100. Let's choose 10. And then here, let's just choose the item for now. Okay, and just leave it as is and press OK. So it gives us our top 10. We can actually right click in there and sort from largest to smallest. Okay, so I have the top channel partner in the first row and then the 10th down there. Okay, so it gives us that. It's fantastic, top 10. Another thing is you can go to conditional formatting. So conditional format, and let's make a data bar here, which is new in Excel 2010. And let's make it, let's choose that. So once we choose that, we can actually have to select the third option. So the third option means it's going to conditionally format all the values except the totals or subtotals. Okay, so you can see there we have the green being on top and the red being on the bottom. But we can actually go in there and just change that around. We can actually put the red on top, okay, and then the green on the bottom. Okay, so you can actually apply conditional formatting, and I've got a whole chapter on my Extreme Pivot Table course on conditional formatting with pivot tables. Now, final tip, one that I love and one that you're gonna get lots of benefit from. Okay, let's put in a new pivot table. Okay, by now you'll know this off by heart. Okay, so we're going to put in our salesperson in here, and then we're going to put in, sorry, the salesperson in the report filter. One second. Let's just move this. Okay, 1 second again. Okay, that's fine. The reason why that happened is because the report filter is going to go onto my, text here. So what it says is, do you want to replace the contents or the destination cells? That's fine. Let's just say yes. Okay, you see that? You just got rid of it. Okay, let's put in the month. Okay, and let's put in the sales in here. Okay, let's put in like that. All right. So, and let's put in the year in there. All right. So we have our sales per month and also per year for each salesperson. And say we have, look, we have 4 salespeople in here, okay? And you create this cool looking report, and you can even put different metrics if you like. Now, say you want to copy what you've done here, this pivot table here with your special metrics, your special conditional format. Say you want to copy that for each different salesperson. Well, you can do that. Okay, easy. Go to options and the options drop down, and then choose show report filter pages. So the report filter is here. Okay, so the salesperson. So show the report filter pages. Click on that, and it gives you an option. It gives you the option of whatever field list is in the report filter. At the moment, we just have 1. So we're just going to choose that. When I press OK, have a look down here. What's going to happen? All the names are going to be created as a separate sheet with the separate values. Boom. Okay. Let's go here. Have a look there. Look at that. We have Homer Simpson, Ian Wright, John Micheludis, and Michael Jackson as the own sheet with their own metrics. So that's fantastic. So you can take that, you can copy paste, or you can print that, and you can save that page as well, and you can give that to your boss instead of going one by one and doing that. This is a quick and easy way. It's a great tip and one that you should definitely use. Okay, so that has been briefly the pivot table webinar. Now I've showed you the most important features, but there's lots more. There's lots more that you can do with this pivot table, and what I'll show you now is just go on to my course and I'll show you the different parts that are within a pivot table. Okay, so in the course you've learned a lot of things about pivot tables, but there are heaps more. Now I've got a course called the Extreme Pivot Tables, and I've worked over 12 months to get this course out. I've read many books, I've searched the web, I've looked at all the different scenarios and answers, and I've come up with a course where I have over 200 videos, 217 to be exact, and I go through every single aspect of pivot tables. I also have a lot of tips, and I also have a lot of business finance cases and some accounting cases as well. So I'll put everything into practice. I also have some bonus workbooks, and I'll show you just quickly here. Okay, so this is the course here. It's an online course, and it's also downloadable as well. So you can view it online, and you can also download the videos, and you can view them when you are in transit, in a train, or you're waiting at an airport, or you're flying, and you've got some time to watch some videos without being connected. And the good thing about this is that all these videos are about 3 minutes each, or just less than 3 minutes. So they're quick, they get straight to the point, and you also get each workbook that pertains to each tutorial. Okay, so I have an introduction here. I have a pivot table cheat sheet, which is awesome. You can hang on your wall. I have some shortcuts, my top 20, my favorite ones, and they're in animated GIF format, so you can play those and just sit back and view the tips. And also have all the workbooks. Okay, so they're all downloaded there. Okay, now the first chapter is arranging your data set. So it just goes a bit about how you should prepare your data, how you refresh your data, and how you customize your pivot tables. There's a lot of information there. Okay, now the second chapter is about value field settings, and you know how we talked about the sum, count, average, maximum. I'll go through all of those. Okay, now the third chapter is about value field settings, show values as, and we talked about the year to date or running total in, as well as the difference from the previous month. Now that was only 2, but I have 14 different scenarios there, and I have a couple of accounting and financial case studies there. Now in grouping, we grouped dates, we grouped values, we also grouped text, and you can also group by different scenarios as well. Okay, and I show them in here. All right, now sorting, I quickly showed you how to sort from largest to smallest, and you can also sort from different scenarios, left to right, A to Z, Z to A. Okay, now filter as well. We said we filtered the dates for next quarter or next month or next year, and we also filtered the top 10 values and bottom 10. Yeah, there's a lot of different filters. There's heaps of filters, and I go through every filter that is available. Okay, in chapter 7, my favorite chapter is all about slices, how you customize it, how you connect it, and I've got some great business case studies here and some interactive fun tutorial for you. Okay, we also have calculated fields and items. Now we didn't go through that, but it's a little bit specialized, but in here I'll show you exactly how you create a calculated field and also a calculated item. Now pivot charts, I'll go through pivot charts and how to format them. There's 21 different tutorials just on pivot charts, so there's a lot of information there. Now also go about conditional formatting. I showed you how to conditional format just a row or just a pivot table area, but there's different ways to conditional format. That's a whole course in itself, but I go through every single conditional format tool within a pivot table, and I'll show you how to do that. And it just brightens up your pivot table, and it just looks much better, and then the result is just much more appealing, and then your management team is definitely gonna love you for it. Okay, now the get pivot table formula, a lot of people don't understand that. It's a great formula. I explained to you how you should apply it and when you should apply it, and it's a great tool to use. Now also talk about macros in here, so you can also do pivot tables with macros, so you can automate it with the press of a button. You can change your pivot table. So there's a few tips there, a bit of data management and how you can reduce the size of your data, and also different tips. And also I've got in there how you can interact with Microsoft's OneDrive. Okay, and finally I have bonus videos just for you guys, and it goes through sales forecasting. I also make a balance sheet, an interactive balance sheet, reconciling customer payments, a break-even model, heaps of information there. You get all the videos there. There's 217. You get all the workbooks, and I'll just show you now. Let's just go into one video there. Let's just click there, and then it goes into the video there. Okay, you see how quick that is, and it comes up. Okay, on the left you have the 14 different chapters, and then we're in here now. Okay, so it shows the video. Let's just make it bigger. Okay, so you can see it there, and I don't know whether you can hear it or not, but it's nice volume there. You can hear everything. You can also download the video. Just press that, and then bang, look at that. You have it straight away. You can download it. Okay, you can watch it whenever you want, offline, at work, in the plane. Now attachments in there, I have the workbooks. You click on that and then press open, the workbook comes up. Okay, so you have that. Okay, let me go back in here, and okay, so we can exit out of that. You can also see how you're progressing, so the percentage of videos that you've seen and what's left as well. You can also discuss, so you have any questions, you can go and discuss with your fellow students and also with myself. So if you have an issue, just write something there and I'll respond back to you straight away. So this is a complete comprehensive course, and my fellow Excel bloggers have said that this is currently the best course in the world. Another person said that this is the most comprehensive course that they've ever come across, and it is. I've spent a lot of hours, a lot of time just to make this course remarkable. So once you finish it, you just become an Excel expert, and you just get to another level, and you can get those promotions that you want. And once again, thank you very much for taking time out to take part in this special Pivot Table webinar. I hope that you've learned a lot. I know that you've learned a lot, and you've taken the first step into becoming a Excel master. Okay, so good luck, and I'll see you inside the course.